Those are today's Tech Lives. As gamers prepare to head indoors for the dog days of summer, animal activists are barking at video game makers about the depiction of certain breeds of dogs in games. PETA recently went to battle with the makers of the popular Facebook game Mafia Wars for their use of dogs as a fighting tool, and PETA won. Ahead of the Curve contributor Christina Capatides investigated whether this depiction of dogs in games is an isolated incident or part of a larger trend.
A new trend in media these days is featuring pit bulls as weapons and enemies, perpetuating a public relations battle that this victimized breed cannot afford to fight. I spent a day with Lisa LaFontaine, the president and CEO of the Washington Humane Society, and her own rescue pit bull, Lila.
When she came to us, she was emaciated. She had purple paws and purple lips from being in her own mess, and her stomach had probably 30 or 40 blisters from urine burns. And yet the officer who rescued her tells the story of how he opened the crate and she jumped up into his arms with her tail wagging.
And I learned that the negative stereotype of the pit bull as a violent fighter is a rather new phenomenon.
Pit bulls have actually a long history as members of families. Even if you look back into the 19th century, a good example is the Little House on the Prairie books. The dog was a pit bull, a brindled pit bull. The Little Rascals dog was a pit bull. The first dog awarded for service in World War II was a pit bull. So they've had a long history intertwined with people and living with us.
So why the cultural shift? When Americans spend so much of their time in front of their computers and TVs, the images projected there start to matter. And the more music videos, video games, and commercials show pit bulls as animals that should be feared, not loved, the more people start to believe it. And the more you search, the more you will see dogs being shot or having their necks broken for the gain of the gamer. In Resident Evil, for example, and Call of Duty.
The tragedy of all this is that pit bulls are susceptible to this sort of negative stereotyping because they're so eager to please their people. So if you own a pit bull and you want to use a treat to get it to sit up or lie down, they'll do that to please you. And if your intentions are somewhat less honorable and you want to use a treat to get it to, say, be violent, they'll do that to please you too. So the problem then may actually have less to do with the pit bulls than with some of the people that have gotten a hold of them.
Dog enthusiasts who have seen the softer side of pit bulls and watched as they disproportionately filled up urban shelters recognize the danger of this sort of media.
It isn't just a game, because you're teaching people to get used to abusing or hurting another creature. And so the makers of these games really have to think about what's the impact of on the next generation in creating that. And so I would tell them to cease immediately, because there's nothing good that can come out of it.
So it may be time for media makers to let sleeping dogs lie. Christina Capatides, ABC News, Washington.
Coming up, location-based social networking.